Good morning, it's my pleasure to have all of you here. Today is September 11th, Brain Hub created by Ukrainian Media Center Ukraine Forum starts its operation, and I want to thank everybody who joins us here today. It's year 10 of the war, and today is day 565 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and today we will be talking about Deoccupation. We are about to have the presentation of Ukrainer's multimedia project that tells about the war crimes in the temporarily occupied territories, the crimes committed by the Russians. So I want to introduce our speakers today. It's Oleksandra Romantsova, Executive Director at the Center for Civil Liberties, Vitaly Poberezhny, producer of the docu-series Deoccupation, and also joining us is Karina Pelugina, producer and author of Ukrainer's projects. Good morning, dear friends. We know that starting from the year 2022, Ukraine has reoriented. They started making reports from the deoccupied territories, telling about what was going on there, about the crimes committed by Russians there. You recorded a lot of interviews, comments of the policemen, military, local residents. So please tell us about this work. We know that yesterday we had an important date, the anniversary of the occupation of Izum, so probably I would like to start with you, Vitaly. So how have you come up with this project? What are its components? The docu-series Deoccupation the idea emerged in the end of April last year when we were reformatting and we were asking ourselves what to do next. We had talented producers, good production, so we've come up with this question: what should we do now that the war is going on? And in April, the Kiev, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions were deoccupied in the north of Ukraine, and our team decided that it would be cool to go and see what's going on in the freshly deoccupied territories, to talk to the military who liberated those areas, to talk to the local residents who were staying there. So we've made our first trip to deoccupied territories. We were talking to the civilians who were staying in occupation. We were talking to the military who were liberating those towns and villages, and we focus specifically on the people who were resisting. Those are the stories of those who were not afraid to resist the enemy. You know, there is non-violent resistance, like spreading the leaflets, and there is armed resistance when you burn the tanks using the Molotov cocktails. So we were looking for the stories of those most courageous people, like those, and there are stories like those in Chernihiv, Gostomel, Sumy. There is a story of Trostenets, about the cooks in Trostenets. Those are the stories of bravery of Ukrainians, about them not being afraid to resist the enemy in occupation. And then we went to the east when, well, it was not a counteroffensive, a full-fledged counteroffensive, but it was liberation of a number of territories in Kharkiv region. There was a Slobozhansky counteroffensive in the autumn, then Kherson, and now the counteroffensive is going on. And today we have 24 episodes of the occupation. So tomorrow we go to Melitopol area to make a 25th episode. Karina, so what was your goal in the beginning and what was the result? I'm sure that's something that you've seen. It kind of changed the goal and the purpose of your project. Well, when we decided to leave, we had no specific plan. We only wanted to find out what's going on there, specifically in those places which were not covered by the news. We had a lot of protagonists from our previous stories, from the stories that we've made during our first expeditions, and it was important for us to understand how are they doing, how did they survive the occupation, what was going on there. And I remember that we were looking for some context, We were calling people as we were going there. We had no specific plan, and the idea itself of Deoccupation as a documentary, it was formulated during our trip, during the shooting of the first episodes, because we've heard an immense number of stories of resistance, both from the military and civilians, who were doing some fantastic things like stealing Russian radios, eavesdropping, or they were pointing our artillery at the military convoys of Russians and stuff like that. We were making an episode about the Холодный Yar Brigade, the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, and the military were telling us about the military convoy destroyed near Trosten, as they were providing their videos, and the local guerrillas were telling us the same story of the same convoy. The civilians, I mean, so it's the result of the joint effort by both civilians and military, like jaggers and hunters and people like that. Thank you very much, Oleksandra. How important are projects like this, and how can they help in bringing Russia to criminal liability and all those who were committing crimes in our land? Thank you very much for the question. I want to thank Ukrainians for the marvelous job they've done. It's a very important decision to document, to film things, to talk to people while their memories are fresh, until they've heard like more stories. You know, there is such a phenomena as juxtaposed memory, you know, when people have some memories which are not real, but as you go to those areas where people still remember, you know, occupied territory is the place where people still continue living, and deoccupied territory is the crime scene where you have to bring order for the people to continue living there, to fight against what Russia wants. So it's important again to document those things right upon the deoccupation very promptly, very quickly. So it's a tender balance between three factors. First, any practices that were committed, I mean the resistance practices that emerged in some territories, they continue functioning in the occupied territories. So demonstrating the methods of resistance here, we should not frame or put in jeopardy our people which still live in occupied territories. Then you have to demonstrate it all in a very sensitive way to make sure that the audience beyond Ukraine perceives it in a right way, because it seems to us that everybody knows what's going on there. For us, is the whole life 24/7, but for people in America, say, or in Nicaragua, Chad, Palestine, they have their own problems, you know. I've named like not typical democratic countries that we keep hearing about, but something where such problems are unusual and people may have other problems. So it's an important basis for political decisions, like voting for the resolutions in the United Nations, that we need creation of international tribunal, that we need a lot. So it's still not an investigation, but it's an important step for further important political decisions to make such investigations happen. And a third thing, again, we cooperate. We offered the cooperation to Ukraine in making a systemic database. We have more than 50,000 documented war crimes, including thanks to these two wonderful projects like this. And this is where we prepare the appeal to international criminal courts, so they can pay attention to a pattern of crime that may become a systemic case, where we can prove that the liability goes to the top level that there was a specific order to shoot at everybody. And it also influences the fate of our prisoners of war, because many people were resisting non-violently, so they were not combatants, or they took up the arms and they've become combatants. So such people are currently imprisoned, and thus Russia violates the rights of everybody, like civilians whom they are supposed to let out, and the prisoners of war. They have this specific status to be protected, you know, to make sure that they are provided with food, to have the communication with the International Red Cross, for example. So it is all of critical importance, and we can talk about it when such projects as Ukrainian has offered make such things real. At this very moment, we influence Russia in one way only, like only fighting it, and other countries can influence Russia economically, politically, in a number of other ways. So this reality is created, you know, to immerse the citizens of other countries into our reality so that they can take relevant decisions. Karina, Vitaly, today we are about to see one of the episodes. Can you give us a little bit more detail about this episode and about the components of these multimedia projects? We see that we have VR goggles in this studio, so what are the components? Well, let me start from the second question. Our project, Deoccupation, it expanded its formats. First, we only had multimedia stories like video and long reads in our website, but then we've realized that it has a more intense potential. We were making 360 videos in VR format to make sure that the immersion in this atmosphere is the profound possible, so it works on the people who don't really understand what was going on in those places. So we've created subtitles in English to communicate, first of all, to the foreign audience, and we were able to create a book of reports because the journalist in that episode is Bohdan Lohvynenko. He was taking the most interviews from the protagonists, and his experience, you know, since nothing, well, not everything could be published in the video due to security reasons. So reflecting his experience and some backstage things, Bohdan has come up with a book of reports based on the documentary and all of our trips. Talking about the video that you are about to see, that's a video from Izum. Our team came there in the end of September, right after the occupation, within the first couple of days, and we were among the first journalists to get there. Well, I think it's better to see rather than to keep talking about it, so I propose to watch this episode. Caution, the video may have fragments of shocking nature. Fragment of video story.
Давай, да, ну что у нас тут коридор.
Ми зараз в Ізюмі, і тут, власне, масові поховання. Це саме це місце, де знайшли понад 400 тіл цивільних. Ми вже трошки поспілкувалися з людьми. Люди не дуже охоче говорять з нами, тому можу розказати, що ми почули. Ми почули, що, власне, багато кого ховали прямо біля дворів, так як в Бучі, так як в Ірпіні. І потім росіяни їх перевозили сюди, тобто вже перепоховували. І тому, власне, коли відбувається тут ексгумація, від багатьох тіл вже мало що залишилося насправді. Тут теж знайшли тіла Збройних сил, учасників і військових. І, власне, зараз можна побачити, що доволі багато людей, поліція працює, зараз приїдуть ще журналісти, які, власне, фіксують ці злочини і передають цю інформацію всьому світу. От. Ми спробуємо знайти тут людей, які брали участь в якомусь опорі або знають про такий опір, і спробуємо з ними поспілкуватися. Так як місто тільки деокуповане, тут настрій такий доволі тривожний, бо люди в першу чергу хочуть знайти своїх рідних, знайти тих, хто з безвісті пропав або хто був перезахоронений і невідомо, де зараз знаходиться.
И сразу радио и
Кажу, Міша, що то бомба, чесно говоря. Ні, то авіаудар був. Вийшов по воду з відрами і живий остався ноги. І 7 чоловік похоронив. 7 чоловік.
Капець.
Каже, хіба буде такі возять бомби обичні. Авіаудар був хороший. Ракета взагалі.
Угу.
А ви звідси, так? Да?
Та я на Гончарі. Ну що там падали, колаборанти були. Купили місці газом. Та їх там розстріляли.
Що з ними зараз?
Так, Віра, ховається, перекрасили. Тільки отак було, тоді отак ось. А потім можуть опять прийти, опять отак можуть зробити. Рано або ні?
Не тільки в Ізюмі, а й в інших містах ми фіксуємо злочини, військові злочини проти цивільного населення України. Такі місця утримання і катування ми зафіксували в місті Балаклія, в селищі Козача Лопать, в місті Вовчанськ. Майже в усіх місцях, де стояли, вони незаконно полонили, утримували, катували цивільне населення Харківщини. Це місце масового захоронення людей. Воно виникло під час окупації російськими військами території Ізюм. В результаті злочинних військових дій росіян проти українців гинули люди. Декого вбивали вони, декого катували, деякі загинули в результаті артилерійських обстрілів росіянами цивільних будинків. Люди спочатку хоронили своїх сусідів на прибудинковій території, на вулицях. Цивільних хоронили як на кладовищі звичайному, так і в інших місцях. Однак наразі ми встановили це як найбільше масове захоронення цивільних людей.
И тоже было сказано про 1000 людей здесь погибших в Изюме. Вот откуда эта цифра?
Що стосується Ізюма, я не можу сказати, підтвердити цю цифру. Однак, відповідно до того, що на даному імпровізованому кладовищі захоронено 445 людей попередньо. Ну, ще хочу сказати, що це цифри попередні, оскільки ми надаємо цю цифру у зв'язку з аналізом тих робочих зошитів, які ми вилучили у людей, які хоронили. Однак під час огляду могили ми, наприклад, вчора встановили, що в одній могилі було виявлено рештки 5 осіб, з них 2 дітей. І точну кількість людей, які захоронені в цьому місці, буде надано після проведення слідчих дій повністю на цьому кладовищі, на цьому місці масового захоронення.
Пане Сергію, скажіть, будь ласка, що, власне, тут робить Національна поліція зараз? Як відбувається процес ексгумації?
Слідство Національної поліції зареєструвало кримінальне провадження за статтею 438 Кримінального кодексу України. Після того, як до нас надійшла інформація про виявлення масового заховання людей, на превеликий жаль, ми зафіксували 445 попередніх могил. Це цивільні люди, які заховані кожен в окрему могилу. На могилі мається позначка номер. Це не просто номер. Ми встановили людину, це група людей, які приймали участь в захороненні цих людей. Вони ввели свої зошити, журнали для того, щоб якось підписати, звідки вони забирали, чи якісь дані встановити. І ми ці журнали зошити вилучили. І зараз проводимо огляд цього місця події з вилученням тіл загиблих, щоб ідентифікувати їх, по-перше, встановити, що стало причиною смерті. Під час своєї роботи ми фіксуємо, що в деяких тіл зв'язані руки, тіл цивільних, деякі мають мотузку на шиї. Хтось має пошкодження органів, які можуть свідчити про наявність катувань. Однак, оскільки тіла хоронилися в могили без труни та будь-яких мішків, вони мають гнилісні зміни, що, звичайно, ускладнює роботу по ідентифікації їх і по встановленню причин смерті. Ми працюємо сьогодні 4-й день, і за 3 попередні дні ми вже вилучили 111 тіл. Ці тіла ми після вилучення направляємо до Бюро судово-медичної експертизи, де проводяться відповідно до постанови слідчого судово-медичної експертизи.
Чи взагалі можливо знайти тих, хто вчиняв ці катування?
Переконаний, що можливо. І цим поліція займається. Для цього ми по кожному місцю їх дислокації, по штабу, по комендатурі, по катівням, ми проводимо детальні огляди місця подій з залученням сучасної криміналістичної техніки. Відбираємо ДНК, відбираємо сліди пальців рук, вилучаємо звідти документи про їх діяльність, де вони залишили, втікаючи з Харківщини. Це ми робимо для того, щоб сформувати базу відповідних і розслідувати кожен факт окремо, досить детально, для того, щоб кожен винний поніс відповідальність. На превеликий жаль, мабуть, це їхня така терористична машина була націлена на те, щоб максимально прогнати або провести цивільне населення через такі місця, оскільки, як, наприклад, ще ж звернемося до Балаклії, вони постійно оновлювали склад цивільних людей, які там утримувалися. Тобто потримали людину 4-5 днів, 7 днів, когось більше, відпускали, зафільмувавши його, що він підтримує мір, і заповнювали їхнє місце новими цивільними людьми. Так працює країна-терорист, так працює Росія.
Если не ошибаюсь, в ту же ночь.
Я Дуванський Олександр Олександрович, 50-го року народження. Розшукуємо свого сина Дуванського Олександра Олександровича, 81-го року народження. Він пропав більше місяця тому. Більш вірогідніше, що його забрали росіяни і могли його розстріляти.
Як це сталося?
Знайшов десь камуфляжну форму української армії і одів, може, куртку, може, брюки, не знаю. І на велосипеді він поїхав на дачу. 2 неділі раз він їздив туди-сюди. А це в цій формі він як поїхав, його забрали і більш ми його не бачили.
Я чув, що після цього проходили в квартиру з обшуками.
Росіяни по паспорту оприділили його прописку, піднялися, обшукали і побачили, він в підвалах, як ми жили, там проблема була із світлом. От. Свічок мало було. І він ото конструював з різних батарейок, додавав, паяв, щоб як-то зробити світло. От. І вони подумали, напевно, що він якийсь агент, координатор, наводчик, може, чи як
Партизан.
партизан, так. Газети регулярно приносили нам Ізюм, Z, Харків, Z, гаражі взривали наші, відкривали, кому що подобалось,
Просто забирали,
Да.
мародерили.
Машину мою не забрали із-за того, що вона перед війною поламалася і стояла на 3 колесах.
Як вам вдалося зберегти прапор?
Вдалося.
Я його ще зняв з горисполкома, коли ще не було росіян, і ми були на такій нейтральній зоні, не туди, не сюди. Я пішов в горисполком, я зняв прапор Ізюма малиновий і український прапор. Він був захований в шифонері у нас. От. Могли його знайти, якби шукали.
І ще потім з цим прапором. Тобто, коли ви зрозуміли, що...
А тоді, коли 10 числа росіяни тікали як щури.
Быстренько меняем колесо. Нужно как можно скорее из Изюма выскочить, вернуться обратно по единственной артерии, потому что по темноте уже будет, конечно, опасно. С вами был проект «Варгон».
По центральній вулиці їде БТР, а за ним бензовоз. На бензовозі сидять, як саранча, обхватили чоловік 20 росіян, от, брудні, форма брудна, самі брудні, тікали. Оце я так жалію, що не пощастило мені засняти їхнє бігство.
В мережі з'явилося відео, як на Харківському напрямку в одному із сіл танк Російської Федерації зустрівся з жахом, з українським бійцем. Ворожий Т-72 намагався втекти від Збройних сил, однак наш військовий не розгубився і відкрив по танку вогонь з гвинтівки, після чого з нього окупанти з танку почали сипатися, знаєте, як в тирі, один за одним. Від звуків пострілів водій танку намагався, як Need for Speed, увійти в поворот, однак на заваді стало дерево.
11 числа ми почули на площі, в центрі стрільба з автоматів, з кулеметів. Непонятно було, що. А то наші солдати якби вітали і призивали людей: виходьте, вже прийшла воля, бояться нічого. І ми вийшли на площу. Тут дивимося, солдати під'їхали, повісили прапор над горисполкомом. От. І тільки від'їжджають, побачили нас, нам махають, і ми їм махаємо. От. Ну, ми підійшли біля центру горисполкома, на фонарі, повісили свій прапор.
То це був один з перших прапорів, які тут замайорів.
Так. Він був поганенький такий.
Мабуть, саме перший то був на Кремінці, на горі.
Саме перший, 9 числа, де Богоматір там з крестом на горі. Там Микола Іванович Калюжний з другом своїм повісили перший прапор. Ще були росіяни в місті, але там прапор уже. А другий, це ж повісили наші солдати.
А Калюжний це хто?
Це зам главного редактора газети «Обрій Ізюмщини».
Ага. Скажіть, будь ласка, чи ви спілкувалися з росіянами?
На КПП, як проходили паспорта перевіряти, я ж кажу, я одного спитала. Він каже: ой, побачу в паспорті, що я звідки родом. О, каже, а я теж хохол. Я не видала, питаю, а чого ти сюди прийшли? Він пожав плечима.
А взагалі старались обминати їх 10-ю дорогою, щоб не зустрічатися з ними. Особливо ці ЛНР, такі негідники, мародьори, грабували. У мене є і номера машини їхні, газелі, ті бортові, які пакували туди награблене і вивозили до себе на Луганщину. Що навіть машинку швейну стару забрали.
Нам треба йти.
Ну, та почекай, вже закінчив. І цей. Навіть сонячні батареї у людей знімали і везли туди.
Чи був у вас хоч якийсь зв'язок
З чим?
з людьми на неокупованій частині України, на вільній Україні? Чи був під час
У
окупації?
мене діти на Західній
Під час
Україні.
окупації приходилось
Сестра.
ходити на вершину Кремянця, і там інколи з'являвся зв'язок. І от,
По 2 години шукали, там багато людей.
Єдина проблема була заряджати телефон. Телефон, фонарики, де ми могли зарядити. Це проблема. З їжею проблема була на початку дуже велика. Їли те, що нам ключі пооставляли люди з наших квартир і дозволили користуватися цими їхніми продуктами. Так що хліба проблема була, хліба не було спочатку. Пекли перепічки різні, там блини, там таке. Ну, так виживали.
Окупація, немет. Страшно всяко було, особливо як бомбили, як під наш дім бомба впала, як дім підскочив, що ми не знаю, як ми вижили.
Та хіба одна вона була.
Там центр взагалі.
І я попадав під обстріл, і мене ранило в голову, і вухо розсікло.
А тікали від бомбьошки, я ногу чуть не зламала.
А від касетних бомб, як ми чудом вижили. Повезло, що вітрина магазина була розбита, почався нальот оцих касетних бомб. І ми вскочили у вікно і заховалися за колона така. А тут почалося ближче. Все пиляка, все осколки мимо нас летіли. Коли це затихло, вийшли на вулицю, гілля від дерев усіяно на тротуарах. Повезло, здорово повезло, що Бог нас зберіг.
Вони не дуже в гарному стані. Більш того, вони захоронювалися без труни, без будь-якої мішків чи чогось-небудь ще. У зв'язку з чим стан трупів незадовільний, не мається гнилісні зміни.
Vitaly, Karina, I would like to ask you, we understand that basically the movies are based on communication with those people who survived. Well, it's impossible even to imagine what they have survived. So how do you understand that some footage should become a part of your documentary and something should be kept beyond? Well, I would like to start with the idea that the way people treat those who perished and how they treat the memory of those who perished is very important. And for the Russians, the memory of those who perished, the realization of the fact that those were the live people with their families, with their stories, for them they're just numbers, and they never thought about recording names or family names of those who died. They were just putting numbers. And I think that many such burials are still to be discovered in the territories that are now occupied. I'm horrified just to imagine what we're about to find in Rubizhne, Kremenna, or Donetsk, and the way that Russians treat the bodies breaks the loved ones of those who perished. And you know, while we were watching this movie, I went online and I've read that 57 bodies from Izum are still not identified. So that's the result of that barbaric attitude to the way that people are being buried. Like, people will probably look for the bodies of their loved ones, both civilian and military, for decades to come. The same thing is going on in Spain now. I finished the book about Spanish Civil War yesterday. After 80 years, people continue searching for the bodies of their family members. It's a result of such a barbaric attitude to the bodies. And the same thing happened in Balkan countries during Yugoslavia wars, and due to Russian invasion, this is what is still ahead for us, and Russia should be brought to liability for that. Well, talking about the footage, we make footage like this to demonstrate it to the people so they realize what's going on, because the most painful footage is the most important, because everybody should understand what's going on, that it's a genocidal war. And for me, even no matter that I visited those burial sites a year ago, it's still difficult for me to see it, but it seems to me that we don't include some footage rather for security reasons, not because they are sensitive. Sometimes we may leave something beyond the documentary if relatives of those people whom we make footage of are still under occupation, or when we take interviews from the military family members. So for us, it's the filter whether all the Ukrainians are still insecure, are safe and secure. I'm sorry that we include that footage in the documentary, but if it violates somebody's security, so we don't include it. So my idea was to demonstrate this specific piece because I think it's one of the most important pieces that we've made during or right upon the deoccupation. Well, I would like to add that it's just a fragment of all the Izum series that was published in the second part, which tells about the mass torturing of everybody whom Russian deemed dangerous, of all those whom they wanted to denazify or denationalize, as they call it. And one of such people was a serviceman of national police, Mikhailo, called sign Vedmid, the bear, and he was telling us in detail what Russian occupation authorities did to him, what tortures they resorted to right on the spots of those crimes. And that second part of this video is real difficult, and we realize, that those stories are just fragments of what was going on, because in Izum itself a number of such torture chambers were confirmed, and this machine of tortures and destruction of all Ukrainian was working very intensely. And remembering the history, they have a very good experience of it. Well, I cannot help but ask whether you know the fate of this married couple. Were they able to find their son? Well, unfortunately we don't know. Dear friends, please join our conversation. If you have any comments or questions, please let us know, please.
security media. For those of us Westerners, you need a moment for translator? Good? Okay. Those of us who are Western journalists who also go to these areas like I did with Izum last year and last September, or Kherson, when we also get this type of footage, where, because it's one of the things I do, is I ask them, tell me about your time during occupation, how did you work together, lots of questions. How would you like that type of material submitted to you? And are there ways that those of us who are doing this can interact with you so we can increase the quality of what we do at a standard that also works with you, etc.? Дякую.
I'm just thinking these materials because it can be a part of our database, and we do that education for Ukrainian journalists, exactly how to make this archive. We know that you not use for materials all what you bring from there, but how make these materials possible using the court in the future. Питання було щодо того, чи буде корисними такі матеріали.
The question was whether such materials would be interesting not only from Ukrainian but also from the Western journalists who are sometimes first to come on the crime scenes, because they will serve as interesting materials during the trials over Putin. And just like it happened in this documentary, when people were recording some basic information, the spots where crimes were committed, and it helps a lot during such things as DNA tests, which requires a lot of money to process. Because, you know, when the bodies are found in conditions like those, we need to understand that it's a very typical practice. The first mass grave was found back in 2014, when to the memorial of the World War I, the occupiers from the Hirkin team, they added 28 bodies to that memorial, and only because it was a children's hospital where the chief doctor and anesthesiologist have seen that process. They've seen those bodies being buried. They were Protestants from the Christian community, so it's the critical right of their relatives and us as a society to know what has happened to those people, because Russians were moving people very frequently, and people from Kiev region could be killed in Belarus or Kharkiv region, well, where they were bringing civilians to Russian Federation. And it's important to have the documented information from the first hand. And if you're hearing us in occupation, somehow please record everything that you deem important. Please hide that information, because the Russians realize that it may serve as the accusation for them. So do it in a clandestine way, and then hand it over to journalists or to investigators or any other persons who document such events. Joining us here also is Bohdan Lohvynenko, who is the author of the book that was made of those conversations with the people. Mr. Bohdan, we would like to give the floor to you, so you tell us a little bit about this work you've done. Thank you. I just wanted to give a couple of details about that man. As of 1 week ago, we were passing by Izum and we met Mykola Kaluzhny. We handed over the books to him and to that man who put the first flag. So we know that they were not able to find their child. The book, as Karina has already said, is a result of reflection over our reports. In fact, a couple of months I was remembering that experience of our journeys. The book was written in 2023, but I was trying to reflect what we've seen in year 2022, all the reports are basically recorded starting from the liberation of Kiev region and ending with Kherson. And now we continue documenting new stories, and they are of a completely different nature, because all of the deoccupied territories that were deoccupied last year, they continued resisting, and such resistance was of mass nature. We continue seeing how it happens in the occupied part of the Kherson region. People don't come to those pseudo-elections. That's the way of resistance too. And regardless, even the fact that a couple of days ago there was a video, a woman was making a video from her window as armed military came to her home with the voting with a ballot box, so she acted as if she was not at home. She didn't open up on him. So the nature of those stories that we continue documenting is completely different. They are mostly the wartime stories, because people in the occupied territories who continue resisting, they become less and less, because it's difficult to continue resisting so long. And that's why when there will be the occupation of the territories that are under occupation for 8 or 9 years by now, we should think about how to tell those stories, how to tell about the resistance there, because the majority of the people who were resisting, they have already left or unfortunately got imprisoned or died, so it's very difficult. Well, that's it for me. Thank you. Dear friends, if you have any more questions or comments, please join our conversation. Well, meanwhile, I have a question to you, Miss Oleksandra. We understand that you work mostly in the legal field, so it's important for us to bring the criminals to liability. It's a joint effort for all of the Ukrainians to reestablish justice and to make sure all the crimes are punished. So how can those documentaries help in this case? Maybe you will give our journalists a little bit more information. What can be most important in this regard? The names, the family names of those who were committing crimes. What should we focus on? Well, such materials can be a way of documenting crimes, not yet investigation, but documenting, which is the first step to justice. When we can call something a crime, we obviously want everybody who committed those crimes with their hands, or who were undertaking the political decisions to start the aggression or were given orders, we want all of them to be brought to liability. But basically, according to my prediction, the majority of them will die. But they created a society with high level of crime, even in the government, and the high level of violent crime. So it shouldn't stop everybody who was affected to have justice. And justice is when you can call something a crime first. And those crimes committed by Soviet Union, by Russian authorities, we were not able to wait until those crimes are punished. So all the documents, all the records, all the specific dates or approximate times, all of such details are very important, just in the way those materials that can identify what is there. Is it a part of a landmine or some numbers on the ammunition box or something like that? It gives us the opportunity to perform further search what unit was based there. So it's the training course that we make for the journalists. Please request this training course from us. We created it with Ukrainian journalist community. And please don't forget that such materials, if you maintain them on your personal carriers and then you have to live through the territory of Russian Federation, please upload them to a cloud, and in no case try to conceal it, because it may create a problem for you. You may be intercepted, you may be taken prisoner. You as a live witness who can describe everything based on your memory, you're way more valuable to us rather than the picture than you would be trying to save on your phone. And you will be a valuable witness for the trial. For Ukraine, the most important thing is people, and people can become witness during trials further on. So based on this small piece, which was filmed quite perfectly, we see a lot of potential war crimes. I've just counted 5 of them, and Bohdan just gave his comment on this material and how it works further on, how the International Criminal Court works. In Izum, this international investigation team was working already. They hear about some potential lead, and then they go to a personal contact, and the person starts witnessing. For them, it's important to gather the evidences for the Hague. The case should be very detailed, and this is what we are trying to secure, gathering such online records, collecting evidences from the people. We have field missions to talk to people directly, and this is how we systematize all the materials provided by the journalists, those who document, different bloggers. And I have to tell you, Ukraine is the most documented conflict, starting from maybe 18th century, no matter how well were the World War I and II documented. So our task is to expedite the justice. Karina, Vitaly, let's summarize where your product can be seen and what are your plans for the future. Well, our videos of Deoccupation are available on YouTube. We've made 24 episodes. We're making a 25th one tomorrow. We're gonna make an episode about the 47th Mechanized Brigade who liberated Robotina. That's in addition to the book of Bohdan Lohvynenko, which can be bought in the most of the bookshops. Here you can check out the VR and all. And thank you, Karina. We also have the episodes dubbed in English, because Ukrainian is made in a couple of languages. We have an English version of our channel in YouTube, and a part of our episodes is dubbed in English, and the new episodes are subtitled in English, so they are available online. You can watch them and realize that Russia is a criminal country who should be brought to liability for all of the crimes they've committed. Well, talking about the plans, we continue making new episodes. Well, this year's counteroffensive is not as successful as last year's, but we can continue talking to the military who confidently bite piece by piece of our country back. We had a story about the Marines who work in Mariupol area. They liberated 7 or 8 villages recently. So we need to continue remembering that the occupation is underway, and we are part of this process, just like we are part of the process of justice. As journalists, we have to keep in mind, but we're not only making a report, but we reinforce the justice. Maybe we may ask for some additional evidences, additional photos from those people we interview. So, well, this is the way it happens. Well, I would like to thank our speakers today. Thank you for the great job you've done. Dear colleagues, thank you for being here, for listening to us. As this event is over, you will be able to check out the VR product. Let's continue working for our victory. We want to thank our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.